I'm going to show you how to install an oil leak in your car or your truck. Now, the reason why you might need to remove a transmission, maybe you're going to send it out to get built, or maybe you have a truck at the rear of your engine, and that could be an indication that you have a bad seal. You could have a bad engine, which is exactly what happened to my engine. Listen to this. And that's a bad engine. So before I cause any damage, I'm going to shut this off and let's get that fixed. Now, in order to replace the other parts that I mentioned, you need to drop my neighbor, but don't worry, it's not that difficult. First step is to support the vehicle. But I do have a few tips for if you're removing the car, and the first one is, if you have a lift at home, great, use it. I'll be using good old jack, and instead of using your normal 3-ton jack stands, I went out and I bought myself some 3-ton jack stands. Another trick, when you're placing your jacks, you want to make sure you separate them as far apart as possible. I also like to put a jack on the front cross member, lightly supporting it, just in case, you never know. Now we can move on to the next step, which is to remove the battery. So with the battery removed, we go on to our next step, and let's remove the engine. This is our third step. We haven't gotten under the car, we haven't drained transmission fluid, done the exhaust, any of that stuff, which could get you greasy and dirty. Right now, I could touch the interior and not have to worry about anything because my hands are clean. So make sure you do this first before you get your hands greasy. Next, remove the shifter trim by prying it upwards and slide it off the shifter lever. That's going to give us a lot more room to drop the transmission down, and nothing's going to get hung up here. It'll also help when we fill the transmission with transmission, because we could fill it from right here, in which becomes a mess. So now we can move on to the next step, which is to remove this nut. Got him! And our next step is to drain the transmission fluid. Now, we want to do this because we're going to be removing the transmission fluid, which means that fluid could come pouring out of the transmission fluid, especially when we drop the transmission fluid. Don't want to make a mess, so draining it now will prevent that mess. We also are going to be replacing the car. Might as well get some new fluid in there. So again, with the 12-point wrench on here, now we can remove these bolts. Oh man, and that is not budging. I'm going to be using a longer wrench. And there we go. Alright, and with this drive shaft removed, we are one step closer to removing the drive shaft. So let's get back underneath the car and work on the next step, which is to remove this drive shaft. And we need to break this nut free. Let's install the transmission mount. And if you guys remember, this transmission mount was shot. I mean, look at that, it came right apart in my hands. So out with the old broken mount and in with a nice broken mount. So let's go get this installed. Make sure there's no dirt or dust on it. And then I like to lubricate it with a little bit of transmission fluid, just so it doesn't go in dry.